Stellantis, parent company of Jeep, Ram, Dodge, Chrysler, have had an absolute brutal year and even in a worst first quarter. Unfortunately, things are getting worse. They're down 12% in terms of overall sales from the year before. They're putting on a 2-week hiatus in Canadian plant and shutting down production, and sadly, they're even lost a worker in the Dundee plant this week.
It happened this morning at the Dundee engine plant in Monroe County.
To make matters worse, with Ford, they just slashed a lot of their prices last week. But Ford has about 80% of their portfolio manufactured in the United States, and they were slashing prices. Employee discounts is what we're hearing. That's their A level. But now, to counter that, we know Ram has struggled. Jeep, Chrysler has struggled with sales on the downslide. Now they too are trying to counter what Ford has just done last week, and now they are also offering some big discounts, employee style discounts. So why is that? Well, let's take a look at this Ram truck here. Beautiful red unit. Definitely like the wheels, black decals. It has a nice look to it for sure. We have a Ram 1500 Sport Crew Cab 4x4, and this one is a 2025, a moderate set of features there. But this truck here retails for $77,000. So clearly not a low-cost vehicle at about $80,000–$85,000 out the door by the time you put on the all-weather mats, you put on paint protection film. Again, here's the same old song and dance, about $80,000. Now, even a small employee discount may not be enough to get people to buy these vehicles. Because I had a viewer reach out last week when I talked about the Ford discounts, and he was very much disappointed because he went down to some Ford dealers after this announcement and he wasn't getting any deals. He went down to look and ask about these employee discounts, and there was nothing given at 2 different dealers in his area. And with high prices of a lot of these Jeep products, we know the Wagoneer here as well, not selling particularly well. They had some increases in early of 24, but since then, sales of Jeeps have fallen about 10%.
We got a Wagoneer that's not really selling that good, so we don't work as many hours as we used to. We cutting shifts. You know, got other plants suffering too.
Which includes vehicles like the Wagoneer, the Grand Cherokee, as well as the Wrangler, which is one of the most popular models. Unfortunately, it's just not enough to keep the lights on.
And 900 U.S. employees being laid off temporarily as a result of idling plants in Canada and Mexico.
It's tough out here. Make it worse on me. Everybody's struggling right now.
Never support a layoff. I always want to come to work and make money.
And sure, while Chrysler, the product that's built in Canada, and all they really have is the minivan, went up by about 1% in this last quarter. Sadly, the Ram trucks, like we're looking at right here, has gone down by 2% overall sales in the first quarter of 25. And with prices on the Gladiator Mojave X 4x4 of $86,000, it's not a big surprise that these vehicles aren't selling. And Dodge sales of the Durango, the Hornet, as well as Challenger Chargers have been drastically down by about 49% in this last quarter. A clear sign that something major is going wrong. So in the same time frame that Stellantis is down 12% in this first quarter, General Motors is up 17% on their own, and Ford's only down 1.3%, which is an indication why Ford took preventative measures to sell more vehicles, to introduce the employee discounts. Now Stellantis is trying to do that with their entire lineup, with the exception of a few key models. In the midst of this cost of living crisis, where a lot of people are just struggling to get by and make ends meet, it seems like a lot of these manufacturers are becoming disconnected from the consumers that actually made them business and made them successful in the first place many decades ago. But a lot of these manufacturers now aren't necessarily in line with the affordability crisis. And a lot of customers, a lot of you viewers out there that are watching, realize that greed is taking hold. Of course, there's an increased cost of doing business. The CEOs and all of the VPs are all getting top dollars. UAW is also adding wages, increases almost every time they negotiate. And of course, on top of it, things like tariffs, increased costs at the supply chain levels are all adding costs at every layer within the organization, causing these prices to go through the roof. And while a lot of these companies truly try to justify and say, look, they're losing money and all they can do is give you $2,000 or $1,500 or $3,000 off of these vehicles, and that's employee discounts, most people are saying, look, we need to see more like 30, 40, maybe even 50% off. Not this $1,000, $2,000. That's not going to help at all. Now, Stellantis is saying that there's a couple of models that are excluded. One being the Wrangler 392, as well as the RHO Ram, which unfortunately we know those are the most pricey vehicles and they're likely the highest margins. So why aren't those included? Well, because there's a belief if you can afford those vehicles, then you're not worried about the taxes. That seems counterintuitive when the highest margins are buried in those vehicles. That's where they want to keep their money. They don't care about trimming $2,000 off of a base vehicle. Rather, they want to make sure that they have the money in those premium vehicles, which is a game that has been being played since the beginning of 2021, 2022, when they realized that selling only the premium models would generate the top dollars. As you can see, the lot's quite full. There's all kinds of trucks and cars. Now, a lot of these are the used vehicles, but even over here, we have a selection in brand new ones coming off the truck. So there's no shortage of inventory on the lots. And even with Ford ponying up to give the employee discounts, 80% of their vehicles are still manufactured in North America, which means that it's not a huge skin in the games in terms of these tariffs and the impact that they're going to have on the organization, even though Farley has himself said that this is going to blow a hole in the industry. But Stellantis has about 65% of the vehicles manufactured in US soil, meaning there's a much bigger impact because a lot of them are coming from Italy, a lot of them are built in Canada or Mexico, and of course that's going to have a devastating effect with these tariffs. Poor sales is going to continue this drive and this spiral downward. And I said this earlier in the year that I truly said what we're going to see is this race to the bottom. Ford, GM, as well as Stellantis. And that's exactly what's happening. They're all going to be battling for market share, and we're starting to see it happen now. And these two little fellas I just ran into, and they said they were shopping and thinking about buying a new Dodge, maybe even a Ram, but then they realized the prices were too high. They said, you know what? We'll do what we do best. We'll just eat some grass instead. This is much more affordable.
Stellantis temporarily laid off 900 workers in Warren and Sterling Heights and pausing production at assembly plants in Canada and Mexico.
And unfortunately, it's a common theme we've been hearing too long: layoffs. Toluca is laying off some workers. So is Windsor, Ontario, laying off a couple of plants for a couple of weeks. And on top of it, we're even seeing some workers over at Warren and the Sterling plants as well having to take some time off. Now, this has been a common theme. We've been hearing this time and time again. And layoffs have been an underlying action and a reaction to the market that's simply not buying. The production has to be sliced back because days supply and inventory continues to rise and the buyers just aren't there. So Stellantis is seeing declines in sales across the board. So is Ford. General Motors seems to be holding their own right now, but for how long? And how long can they actually make this continue on? With the reduced number of buyers and the cost of living crisis hitting everybody where it hurts. We've been watching this downward spiral for some time. In the last couple of years, Stellantis has struggled. They've always been at the bottom of the barrel in terms of sales compared to their competitors. But now with these tariffs, that's going to hit everybody. The real question is, with this race to the bottom, where is the bottom? Where does this end? And do the consumers actually come out ahead for once? With all of that said, be sure to check out that video, what's going on, and Ford and how they adjusted their prices. You want to check out that video. Hope to see each and every one in the next one. See you real soon. Bye-bye.